All right, guys. Welcome back to the podcast. And you know what? Let me just start by saying recency bias is a major issue in this sport of ours. And, this was clearly on display in the lead up to this fight between Brandon Moreno and Amir Albazi. And, it was funny because everyone kept talking about Albazi's 5-0 record while stressing the fact that Moreno was coming off a two fights losing skid, which, of course, statistically, those were true. But what no one was doing was putting into consideration the level of competition for both of these fighters, because the reality was, even though his losses were recent, Brandon Moreno lost against Brandon Royval, a legit contender in the flyweight division, and Alexandre Pantoja, the current champion of the division, and the one fighter who no one has yet to find an answer for currently in the flyweight division. So it really did not make sense that people were writing Brandon Moreno off because of these two fights losing skid. But like I said, recency bias, so really no surprise. Counting out Brandon Moreno because of those losses is like saying, at the time where Pereira knocked out Israel Adesanya, it's like saying at that point, saying Izzy is a washed fighter. That's not true, especially in the case of Brandon Moreno here. He fought and he lost against two of the most legit contenders in the division. And interestingly, it wasn't even as if he was knocked out in these fights. It wasn't as if he was cooled, dog walked from the beginning of the round to the end of the fight. No, he lost both fights by split decision. So it's really funny when people, look at those two losses and they were like, you know what, he's washed, he's done, he's never been really great after all. Like, I saw a whole lot of comments and I was like, wow, really? And, regardless of those two losses, the truth was and the truth remains, Amir Albazi was never on Brandon Moreno's level. For context, let's take a look at the level of competition Amir Albazi had on his 5-fight winning streak. Number one, he made his debut against Malcolm Gordon, a fighter who was cut from the UFC with 2 wins and 5 losses on his UFC record. So this was a fighter that could not even manage to get 3 wins in 7 fights. After that, he moved on to Zhalgas Zhumagulov, another fighter who was cut from the UFC with 1 win and 6 losses on his UFC record. He fought against Francisco Figueiredo, a fighter that went 2-2 before getting cut from the UFC, and lost to Malcolm Gordon. Yeah, Malcolm Gordon, the fighter Albazi made his debut again. So, he lost to a fighter who lost to a guy who could only manage 2 wins in 7 fights in the UFC. So, of course, this shows you that this is not a serious level of competition. Then he fought against Alessandro Costa. This is, of course, a fighter who is currently 2-2 in the UFC. But here's the catch. In that fight, Alessandro Costa was making his debut, won, and he came into the fight on short notice. So, of course, I think Albazi was supposed to fight Brandon Royval, but there was an injury and, Alessandro Costa had to come in on short notice. So he was fighting against someone making his debut. And then his 5th fight, Kai Kara France. And this is like the only legit fight on his 5-fight winning streak. Every other thing, I don't consider them serious opposition. So generally, we can say Amir Albazi went 4-0 against fighters who were not really UFC quality. And everyone thought it was the real deal because of that. Really funny. Really funny. I've said it and I'll say it again. He was never on Brandon Moreno's level. And in that fight on Saturday, Brandon Moreno showed that. People tend to forget. And of course, I've said it. Recency bias is a thing in this sport. Like, people forget that this same Moreno went to war on 4 occasions with Deiveson Figueiredo. 4 times. And he came out a victor twice against Deiveson Figueiredo. This is the same Figueiredo that has moved up a weight class to bantamweight and is there causing havoc. Deiveson Figueiredo moved up to bantamweight and he is smoking everybody on his path to getting the title. In 3 fights, Figueiredo has submitted a former champion at bantamweight, that's Cody Garbrandt, and he's won unanimous decision victories over 2 of the toughest, maybe not 2 of the toughest, but 2 tough contenders in the divisions, Marlon Vera and Rob Font. This is a fighter Brandon Moreno went against 4 times and he won twice. They had 1 draw. He only lost to Deiveson Figueiredo once. So it's just funny, like, people were just quick to move on from Brandon Moreno after 2 losses to quality opponents. Like, of course, I know people aren't really interested in the flyweight division as such, but then when you look at the flyweight division, Brandon Moreno has always been and currently still is one of the legit contenders, one of the most interesting talents in the flyweight division. Once again, I'm just saying, regardless of how anybody felt, regardless of, whatever sentiments, Amir Albazi was never on Brandon Moreno's level. And Moreno just had to remind everyone that he was still that dude. And I'm so glad that he did that in that fight, because man, people are just so quick to forget in this sports. People are just so quick to forget in this sports. Brandon Moreno has been in 6 title fights. He's won 3 of those. He's drawn 1, only lost twice. And he only lost to Davison Figueiredo, Alexandre Pantoja. Like, this guy is, for a flyweight, is quality. But, all that aside, I'm glad Brandon Moreno went out there, handled business, let everybody know what time it is. And, with this victory, the question is, so what's next for Brandon Moreno? Of course, I'm glad during the post-fight interview in the Octagon, he said it himself that he still wants one fight before, getting back into title conversations. Of course, and for me, I feel it makes sense. And I quite agree with him, because I don't think a victory over Amir Albazi, I feel like in this fight, Moreno had more to lose and less to gain, because I don't think anyone gets a title shot of a victory over Amir Albazi. But then a victory over Brandon Moreno would have done more for Amir Albazi than it would have done for Moreno. So I feel like he didn't really have a lot to win in this fight. So part of why I'm really glad, he handled business. Like I was saying, what's next for Brandon Moreno? I feel like I would love to see a Brandon Royval trilogy. I feel like that's what makes the most sense at the moment, especially since both of them are currently the closest to fighting for, a title in the flyweight division right now. Of course, both of them have tried against Pantoja and failed. But then when you look at the division, they are still the top guys that are working towards that. So I feel like a trilogy against Brandon Royval, and then we use that as a title eliminator for who challenges the winner of the fight between Pantoja and Kai Asakura. And low-key, I really hope the winner of that fight turns out to be Pantoja, because I'm not really excited with this idea of giving Kai Asakura, a title fight on his debut. And I really wish, Pantoja schools him, and then he goes back the line and has to, build back towards a title run. And if he comes back and he wins it, then no issues, well deserved. So yeah, I feel like for Brandon Moreno right now, put him against Brandon Royval. Let's see the trilogy. If that wouldn't happen, I think a fight against Kai Kara-France would also make sense right now. Any one of these 2 fights, I feel like those would make sense for Brandon Moreno at the time. And, very soon we'll see Brandon Moreno back in title conversations, and hopefully, probably, he will become the champion of this division once again. Oh, thank you. That's the video. And if you love this video, check out this video on the screen right now. You are definitely going to love it. I'll see you in the next one. Bye, people.